All right, well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks, Dan, for that great talk. Always awesome to hear about the Lahontan efforts out there, Pyramid Lake and your tributaries. We're dealing with a smaller system out here in New Mexico, but today I was going to give you an overview of what we've been up to here at Santa Clara Pueblo and on Santa Clara Creek. Just an introduction, my name is Garrett Altman. I've been with the Forestry Department for about 5 years. I serve as the GIS coordinator and project manager on a number of restoration projects. Just a quick overview of what we'll be doing today. A little overview of the tribal lands, the watershed and fishery history, looking at the fires and flood events that impacted us, how we've strategized to move forward through collaboration and a naturalistic approach. And then a lot of photos of our projects, since that's what we usually want to see. And then lastly, just our path forward. So Santa Clara Pueblo is a federally recognized tribe in northern New Mexico. We're one of the 19 pueblos in New Mexico and Texas. We're located on the Rio Grande. And as you can see, we have that hashed out polygon there in the middle is the tribal boundary, which encompasses about 90 square miles of land. We have 3,500 residents within the tribe, plus a number of non-tribal members, just over 5,000. We include everybody. We have a really unique watershed here, traversing the Jemez Mountains to the west, down to the Rio Grande Valley to the east. It's 32,000 acres. The creek and the watershed is really central to the tribe's identity and culture. It's a 24-mile stream that flows from 9,000 to 5,000 feet. And you can see just from the color shading in this image, the high alpine and the dense conifer forest down to the more high desert grasslands and bosque along the Rio Grande. So really that really presents a lot of habitat diversity and habitat types, and also different water quality and temperatures that we have to work with as well. Historically, there were 4 flood control facilities or water retention facilities that were essentially earthen berm dams. They were put in by the BIA in the 1950s and 60s, and they became really renowned for fishing and recreation and another source of identity to the tribe. Here's that 2010 image, looking at the upper watershed, which we'll be focusing on today. The former 4th pond there, you can see down below. Really nice mixed broadleaf pine forests. To the right there, the Turkey Creek tributary that comes in, along with the headwaters of both of those streams. Photo from 2009 to show a close looking at the water quality and the vegetation. For fisheries, historically, the canyon and watershed was home to native Rio Grande cutthroat trout. But with those ponds and recreation in the mid-19th century, really brought in the rainbow trout and the stocked fish, which eventually became hybridized with the native trout. There are other fish that we do incur or that migrate up from the Rio Grande. They tend to stay in the lower portion of the stream, but the long-nosed dace, Rio Grande dace, salamanders, and we have suckers and brown trout as well in the upper reaches of the stream beforehand. There are efforts on the Rio Grande to reintroduce river otter, and they've been quite successful over the past 7 years. We haven't had any on Santa Clara Creek yet, but we have a stream on Pueblo lands across from the creek where they have been going up, primarily because there's a lake located upstream on Santa Clara or in Santa Cruz Creek. And the fish, the otter tend to follow the fish. And since we don't have any fish right now, probably why we don't have any otter, but that's okay at the moment. There was a big effort in 2009 to really try and bring back a pure strain of the Rio Grande cutthroat. In 2009, with the help of the twig grant that Dan mentioned in his presentation conclusion, they worked with the Tribal Wildlife Grant and to eradicate and actually perform a fish cull in 2010 and eradicate non-native species from 4th pond up. And then in 2011, there was scheduled reintroduction. Unfortunately, though, that as you know, whether it be droughts or fires or earthquakes, they often strike unexpectedly. And our watershed in particular has been impacted by 3 wildfires since 1998. The most severe being the Las Conchas fire in 2011, which is the blue polygon on this map. You can see it really encompassed the upper third of the watershed. Actually, just over half of the watershed burned from that fire. And not only did it burn, but it burned with moderate to high intensity fire. The map on the left with the oranges and yellows showing the severity of the burn. And really what that lent to was the what they call hydrophobic soils, or the chemical or the pyro combustion processes actually leading to that water repellent soil you see in many severe fires. Just an image of the fire above Los Alamos before it reached the Pueblo. And what those hydrophobic soils did really was increase the runoff, which you typically see. But what we have here in the Jemez Mountains in particular is a unique geology from the dormant volcanic caldera. And that really equates to poorly consolidated sediments. Your pumice is really lightweight. And when you remove that organic layer from fire, there isn't much holding it together, and you get a lot of sediment transport. So not only did we have a stand replacing canopy fire, but we also had massive erosion that followed. Particularly, we are prone to a seasonal monsoon season here in northern New Mexico. July through early September, we have these very dense precipitation events. They may not be long lasting. However, some of them can last several days, but typically they're 10 to 20 minutes. But you'll get anywhere from a half to 2 to 3 inches of rain falling in that short period of time. What that did in the burn area was result in these catastrophic debris flows. The image at the bottom there actually is from a still from a video our current governor took at the time. That was, I believe, a 12,000 CFS event in a stream that is normally 12 CFS. So exponential increases in runoff and flooding. And with that, the debris you can see in that upper left image, inundating the debris dam in the upper corner here. You can see the relic dam. It overtopped, came down, destroyed recreational cabins, tons of log and woody debris, and not just flooding, but really scouring is what the effect is from these debris flows. Impacts, I'm not going to go too much detail because I want to focus on the restoration stuff, but it breached all 4 recreational ponds. We did receive 6 presidential disaster declarations, scoured the riparian corridor, 100% fish kill, severely impacted water quality standards, and also infrastructure. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers estimates over 230 million in damage assessments. And it continues to impact the tribe culturally. The tribe relies on this as they say, the grocery store, their clothing store, their pharmacy, their biologic classroom. It's the source of their identity and central to their way of life. And to have that cut off from their livelihood has presented enormous cultural challenges. Looking down, these are the former 4 ponds from an aerial survey in 2012. After a few debris flows, and you can see there aren't really any ponds left. This 4th pond is, I guess the dam is still there in this image, but this eventually blew out on a future flood and is completely gone. So yeah, catastrophic loss and impacts. Fortunately, the tribe is dedicated to restoring these resources, and building internal capacity is a big part of that. We worked with FEMA and the National Disaster Recovery Framework. Following Hurricane Katrina, the NDRF was developed to really bring core recovery principles and identify the roles and responsibilities of all the parties and stakeholders involved. Really, one of the central themes of this is collaboration, and that's something the tribe has really been able to leverage and participate in and coordinate. And with that these efforts are really designed to create, more resilient stronger communities for the future. Looking at just a handful of our partners, you know, from the federal to the state to the non-governmental organizations. It's not one agency in particular, but it's really partnering and leveraging these resources that has led to our efforts in restoration. One of the strategies we've really come out with is highlighting the importance of the stream and the water quality to the standards of the tribe. Those standards actually exceed the state of New Mexico water quality standards. So what we did is we said let's prioritize the creek, and everything else can adapt to it rather than make the creek move around the road. Let's see if we can move the road or put it in a place where it won't impede floodplain conveyance or fish passage. So we really looked at incorporating bioengineering and nature-based solutions where possible. We also prioritize natural materials. We do have an abundance, as you can see, the woody debris as well as rocks. And really looking at developing long-term resiliency, not just to extreme events like the floods and the droughts, but climate resilience and climate change in the future. And one other thing we're learning with this is potentially cost effective. You're not limiting your costs aren't limited by having to import materials when you have a lot of the stuff on site. So that helps as well. And another, it's easy to talk about the good and the stuff, but there are challenges. We did have a lot of difficulty finding applications of some of these techniques. We really had to search out in Colorado and Washington and other countries even to look at what we could use. There wasn't much design available. However, we were able to track these down a little bit and modify and innovate. We had to meet BCA requirements, which is required for federal money from FEMA, as well as extensive administrative requirements and reporting and documentation with FEMA. Not an easy challenge. A last thing I note there, quantifying ecosystem services. So what's the value of that willow patch you're putting in that's going to help increase surface roughness and deflect the water into the stream channel versus eroding a bank? Is there money? Does that have an economic value? And there are outfits now that are quantifying these services and providing that value. Fortunately, we didn't need to go that far as meeting BCA with FEMA, but that was something we were looking at. And folks who don't have cultural implications may need to take that route if pursuing FEMA money, at least with BCA. Just an overview of the watershed and the work we've done. Everything inside the red boundary is focused on our restoration of efforts. You can see in the upper reaches where these dots are along these tributaries. These are all erosion control measures that were taken to stabilize sediment. Everything we did started at the top on the National Park Service boundary and worked our way down the watershed. We started with fuel breaks before the fire. After the fire, large-scale mastication efforts, reforestation, hazardous fuel reduction. These blue polygons down on the Pajarito Plateau are all hazardous fuel reduction in the pinyon juniper environment, where we still manage, control burn and mechanical thinning. Oops. Looking at the headwaters, our priorities, we're really trying to retain surface and groundwater for storage, replanting and reforestation, creating habitat for not just fish, but for wildlife as well. Looking at ways we can create off-channel ponds and more surface water storage, but not necessarily rebuild dams to have these earthen berm dams that wouldn't meet today's technical seismic requirements and other requirements through the Army Corps of Engineers for a dam that, they want it to pass a 10,000-year event, which, river restoration folks are like, that's just kind of ludicrous to even try and quantify that because there's so much variability. And then also integrate restoration above and below our road crossing upgrades. And lastly, limit introduction of foreign materials. Looking at the upper canyon, these two blue polygons I put here are where the third and fourth ponds used to be. Our big FEMA project, which I'm highlighting in this presentation because it was our first creek restoration we've really been able to implement. But we had 3 sites. Sites 1 and 3 were on the stream. Sites 2 was a tributary. But really looking at the history of our events here in the text, you know, from 2011 to 2018, those first 7-8 years after the fire, we couldn't even focus on the stream because there was so much sediment transport. And it was imperative that we really start stabilizing and mitigating that erosion at the source. So all these tributaries you see to the north of these red arrows were all treated individually with hand-built structures, utilizing the wood and rocks in site. We ended up we've treated 26 tributaries now. We got 2 more this summer, so it's 24, 26, over 5,000 hand-built structures, and really trying to stop that sediment transport in its source, or manage it to where you can fill in some of the incisions it's made, and promote aggradation and water table rebounding with that as well. You know, as we move forward now, and since 2018, we're prioritizing the upper reaches, primarily above 4th pond, but above 3rd, and working our way down now even further. We're really trying to increase our wetland and riparian areas. This includes, you know, finding those seeps and springs that may or may not be culturally significant, but also prioritizing them from an ecological context, and enhancing them on the downstream side where possible, and really trying to slow that water down, spread it out, increase that wetted perimeter, increase that riparian vegetation that results when that wetted perimeter expands. Integrating off-channel habitat, as I mentioned, these ponds, these pools, it's really the concept of an oxbow lake being separated from the creek, where you have a pond in the ground, or excavated, if you will, or below the ground, but it's in the floodplain. So if there ever is a flood, that pond will help attenuate the flood energy. If there's ever a massive debris flow, those ponds could be sacrificed as sediment retention basins, which is a hazard mitigation technique for tributaries often employed. So we're looking at, you know, creating ponds that'll have ecological benefits for hopefully hundreds of years. But if there's ever a catastrophic fire and debris flow in the future, these ponds could feasibly be inundated with sediment and excavated at a lower cost, or left to terrestrialize and turn into a meadow habitat, which is what they do on their own. Looking above 4th pond, which we'll focus on now with the following photos, looking at, you know, the nature of the projects we have really 5-6 partners here, starting with the gray, with the green line area. That's the NRCS equip. That area was really designed so our crews could go in and limit the woody debris. We couldn't even access the stream in many areas because there's so much down firewood, down burned wood from the fire. So if we went in with NRCS equip for woody residue treatment. Then we came in with the Rio Grande Water Fund on the green areas here to really start building hand-built rock structures and trying to increase that wetted perimeter, and then supplementing that with willow and shrub planting. More recently, we've started up with the FEMA project. We just completed construction on that, and that was really for this area, was just this site 1. Actually, site 2 is above 4th pond on this tributary, but it's not a perennially flowing tributary, so it's not included as at the headwaters. But the site 1 is quite impressive. What we did there, quite extensive. Now, currently, what we're working on, as far as this week even, are Turkey Creek and a little headwaters section above FEMA, and this green polygon up here for some beaver pond revitalization through the Western Native Trout Initiative. I know Chris Ketchian, who's now at BIA, we worked with him on administering this grant when we were first awarded, and through the pandemic and everything, everything got pushed out about two years. So we're happy to finally be implementing that. We're also leveraging that project with some of our youth crews we had this summer through the Southwest Tribal Fisheries Consortium. They were able to receive some funding from the Forest Service to promote fisheries related work on tribal and U.S. Forest Service lands. So we were able to apply the kids to these projects as well. We received a new grant for this yellow area here where this big alluvial fan comes in to promote habitat and regeneration and some off-channel pond conservation trials in that area. Some stream reconnection and limiting sediment and erosion sources as well with that. And then that pink area was not our department, but that was the environmental department. They worked with the EPA 319 non-point pollution program to restore that section above Fourth Pond. And so what this does is all these projects tie into each other, and really we have a Headwaters approach now to restoring this area rather than just having one little section we're building. We're able to really connect the dots, if you will. This is the Site 1 crossing before the culvert was upgraded. You can see very prone to clogging. I mean, we pulled that stick out and it opened up about 20% of the capacity of that culvert. It had blown out a couple times, so high priority area. It's our uppermost creek crossing for the roadway. On the left, looking at the downstream end and potential barrier implications it has there. On the right, a conceptual rendering of what we designed for this. And with our culverts, we're not just looking at the culvert itself, but we're looking above and below the stream. So we made sure we included restoration above and down below the crossing. This is the initial conceptual that we put in. You can see the blue line to the bottom there, looking at potential stream flow. We actually shifted it over further. Looking on Google Earth, this is what we ended up going with. As far as the restoration components above and below. The red areas were off limits, either for cultural significance or seed propagation. There's some great native seed sources and relic beaver ponds. We didn't want to disturb those and use those because they were coming back on their own. We do have a limitation at the tribe for seeding. We're not allowed to import any seed unless it's from the adjacent caldera or in the canyon. So that impedes the ability to revegetate grasses. So whenever we have natural sources, we try to promote those and use those as nucleation areas that can help spread throughout the area. We'll also harvest those by hand and shake the debris out and try and get the seed when it's ripe and promote that. And one other thing to focus on at the top is this cyan line with these green hashtags. At the end of the presentation here, I have some photos of the work we did up there the past 2 days. So pretty hot off the press, but this is a relic beaver pond up here that we were able to go back in and enhance. So this is before and after for that Site 1 crossing. Standing on the crossing, the white circle looking at the tree, you can see where we moved the channel back to its original area before all the sediment came in and deposited and had kicked the stream over to this lower left corner where it incised and didn't have very much habitat productivity. We instead brought it back over here, increased the length, the sinuosity a bit, armored the ends. We've since come in and put some logs and some bank stabilization efforts to limit sediment sources. Looking upstream, you can see the cross vein they put in. That's a combination of both rock and log, feeds the water into the culvert underneath. This picture on the right, you can see we have a spring over here, and we weren't allowed to actually touch the spring. So what we did is some downstream enhancements by installing this log and putting a little bit of an invert here with a second log, having the flow come out. We have a nice tributary here where juvenile fish can connect. Some off-channel habitat is really what we're looking at for all ages and fish, or if not fish, just for bugs. There's also some aspen transplants they put in over on the other side at this base of that bank. This is looking from up on top of that bank, looking down. You can see that log, really how much wetted perimeter we increased with that spring, as well as another seep on the other side. Not necessarily fish again, but maybe juvenile fish or really small fish to start growing where they won't have the predation effects. And then the bottomless culvert, designed really to facilitate stream meandering, fish passage, wildlife passage, and also have a floodplain connectivity within the culvert. That was sized for a 100-year event as far as statistics are concerned. Integrating natural materials is just a continual theme. I just threw these slides in here just to show that we were able to get the engineers to show root wad revetments and willow planting and how we can use these root wads for surface roughness. Looking at the implementation at site 3 here, this is the roadway bank on the right. Both images on the right, you can see how we integrated rock that was sourced locally in the tribe or in the canyon. Looking across at that same feature, this is from a perennial tributary. It just trickles down, but we did have them put in a pond here where that water could potentially pool and then connect through a tributary on the left to the right here. They put the cross vein right in the middle of this, which I'm personally not in agreement with, but the contractors and designers and everybody thought it was fine. And you bring in one party and they think it's great, and another party kind of laughs at it. So you learn everybody has their own opinions, but everybody usually has something good you can contribute. This is just upstream of that last image. What we did here is we actually put in a sediment plug where we kicked the stream from the south side of the channel or the north side to the south side. We didn't want it eroding the bank of the roadway. And also we like to put it on the south side because it promotes shading from the mountains and the sun to the south. So you get those banks that promote shade, especially in the shoulder seasons. And also planting on the south side banks is something we promote a lot of to increase that shading and try and keep that water cold. But if you look down here, you can see this back channel pool. This is a concept we implemented here as sort of a trial, and it seems to work pretty well for the lower half, but where that log is across, we're getting a lot of moss and sediment buildup. So having that water continually flow through is advantageous. So we're looking at how we can, design the water so it flows in and circulates and then exits. But it's all trial and error. As we move upstream and look at our hand-built structures, the image of the left is not treated, but the two on the right are. You can see this is a baffle designed to kick the water over to the other side of the stream and promote sinuosity. One rock dams that are usually 5 rows deep here and on this side too. This was a big rock rundown, so it was actually about 10 to 12 rows deep. Upper left image, before we went in and put in hand-built structures here, we just took the woody debris and just dispersing it along these exposed banks really helps limit erosion and helps plant growth and seed catchment. You can see these structures here. These are some of the first day of the youth crew just trying to dam up areas and really try and promote pools and holes for fish to be able to come in and live. On the right, oops. That's just a wetland that's emerging, hasn't been treated, but it's doing its thing on its own, and we like that and let it do its thing where we don't need to touch it, all the better. One of the techniques that our crew was really hot on 2 years ago is putting in log dams, because they look nice, they create pools, they won't freeze, and we're hoping the fish will come in and stay, and they do for the most part. However, a lot of times log dams are not the way to go for a long term. They tend to undercut. Unless you have them buried 60%, they tend to not hold. And I'd be surprised if this image on the left is actually retaining water anymore. So again, adaptive management, learning from what you're building and not being, glued to it, be able to adapt and change over time. This is just a stream survey. Yes, sir.
Hey, Garrett, you got about 2 minutes.
Okay, I got about 3 slides. So okay. This is the beaver pond revitalization I wanted to mention. This image was last week with the youth. They're actually picking raspberries there. We have a small perennial tributary coming out of right in front of this gal in the blue. This is a relic beaver dam, and it used to connect here and it blew out. So what we did yesterday actually is we rebuilt that beaver dam. We rebuilt the dam, laid geotextile fabric over it, and then covered that fabric with more dirt. And then we came in and we actually scooped out some of this riparian vegetation to increase the depth of the pond. And we ended up getting about 4 feet of depth. Took this vegetation and lined a step pool channel here. And then we created 3 other pools downstream of it. They're still dirty in this picture, but really trying to create that off-channel habitat so if the creek floods, this area will be able to retain fish populations in the future. That other concept of off-channel ponds, we built this one for helicopter dipping for wildland fire suppression resources, but also as a conservation trial. If we're going to do these in the future, do we need a dam? And we learned that, you know, we don't even need a berm to be this tall to retain that water as long as we're within the water table. And then working with diversion structures to limit sediment, but keep that water in. Challenges, as I mentioned, the fish barriers, the moss in this back channel pool down below. You can see the ice in the wintertime. Grazing management continues to be an issue, but we're working with our cattlemen and the sheriff's office, and it seems to be pretty productive right now. Off-channel pond innovation will continue, and really moving forward, how can we get these fish reintroduced and getting a fish barrier and eDNA sampling with New Mexico Game and Fish in the next year. And lastly, grant management, reporting, and monitoring are additional challenges we all face. Restoration takeaways, we're looking at mitigating flooding and sediment, restoring riparian habitat, meeting the stakeholder objectives, and also, you know, maintaining flexibility with adaptive management. I can't emphasize that enough. You go in with an idea, but don't be stuck to it. Be willing to change when you need to. And lastly, satisfying the wishes of the Santa Clara Pueblo, both culturally and economically. I'll leave this up here, but you know what really, I guess I'll mention this last slide. Collaboration, can't emphasize it enough. You can leverage those resources to maximize funding, expertise, even your project footprints. Nature-based solutions are also a great way to achieve a more holistic approach. We're looking to expand in the future with the NRCS, Army Corps, and Army National Guard, really building more conservation trials of these off-channel ponds, trying to limit the cost of rebuilding a $30 million dam, and also increasing public access. If folks are interested in looking at this information further, you can Google Santa Clara Story Map or follow this link. We're also increasing youth and senior participation and trying to connect the stories from before and after the fires. And also get the community's feedback to what they need and what they want to prioritize in our efforts. Looking at our youth crew and keeping them busy with some topsoil spreading. That concludes my presentation. If we have any time for questions, I'm happy to take those. Otherwise, thank you all for your time.
Thanks again, Garrett. Yeah, let's go ahead. If anybody will limit it to one question, and then we'll have to move on to our next presenter. Okay. No. Oh, let's see. Looks like no questions, Garrett. So I appreciate your time, appreciate your presentation. Commend the Santa Clara Pueblo and you for all the work that you're doing. It looks really good.
Well, thanks, guys. Glad to be a part and share our experience. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you.